Hi, my name's Declan Hamblin, and I'm the secondary course lead for the secondary PGCE at Kingston University. So a warm welcome to you, and thank you very much for agreeing to mentor one of our secondary PGCE students. So in this session, which is going to be fairly short and brief, I'm going to cover really all the information that you need to help you start mentoring one of our students. So we won't look at things in depth here, where there'll be supplementary resources and supplementary recordings for you to dip into, but exemplars for you to look at when it comes to some of the documentation. So this is really just a very brief overview of the course, if you like, and the information that we're going to need to get started. So what we'll cover is what we see as the feed-forward cycle and the weekly overview of the things that you will need to do weekly. We'll then look at what's probably the most important task that you have, which is setting targets with the student teacher. We'll look at what we call our professional development portfolio, which is our online cloud sharing system we use on Box. We'll then look at what the mentor quality assurance conferences mean. That's where we come in and visit and see you in school along with our student teacher, and what the assessment is for the year. I'll briefly give you an overview of the KU curriculum. Then there's the documentation that we'll need to get to grips with, and then lastly, giving you some key contacts for further support. So let's start off with the key dates. So these are the things that you'll need to know. So the foundation phase is about to start, and that lasts 10 weeks. We have the induction day for 1 day, where they'll meet the team that they're with in your department and key personnel in the school, get to know policies, procedures, routines that you have, and then you can share obviously any key documentation that they know and check all those checks that you need to do. So what we're recommending is then that the following week is an observation week, so from the 3rd to the 6th of October. Well, they'll probably have a chance to look at the classes that they'll be teaching and also get to see that policy in practice for your school. So i.e., what does the behaviour management policy mean in practice? So observing expert teachers and understanding how they use school policies to enable them to teach effectively, and pupils obviously to learn to their maximum too. So the programme goes from Monday to Thursday all the way through to the end of term, and then the Fridays the students are at university. So what really happens then on the foundation placement? So this is a quick overview. What we're looking at is for a timetable of 40% of the main teaching's timetable over 4 days, and that roughly equates to 7 to 8 hours of lessons. And so what we really want them to do is get to grips with planning, teaching and assessing across the range of pupils and the curriculum content that you have this term. So most of the lessons in their timetable that I have will be across Key Stage 3 and 4. And so we really want to see, if possible, you know, a Year 7, a Year 8, a Year 9, a Year 10 and a Year 11 class. We completely appreciate that giving up Year 10 and 11 classes, which are examination classes, may be troublesome and difficult. And we're not necessarily expecting that, but just a chance, potentially, it could be that if they can be timetabled to maybe team teach or teach sections of those lessons, or even just observe an experienced practitioner, that would be great. If there is some Key Stage 5 experience possible, then that's great, that's beneficial for them. And for some of the subjects, that will be important, because that's the area that they'll teach in terms of their topics. I'm thinking in terms of citizenship and social science, and that's perfectly fine. In terms of the rest of their week, we certainly expect there to be timetabled 3 to 4 hours, or 20% of the timetable in terms of observation. So certainly they'll spend a lot of time on focused observations, which they've had detailed sessions on in terms of what to look at, and again, learning from experienced practitioners, not only within their subject, but outside of their subject as well. So we're all aware of experts in the schools that we work in that are maybe potentially great using assessment for learning, or potentially really good with behaviour management. And so sometimes it's really helpful for students to see outside of their subject and understand how teachers set up their classroom and their culture, and how they, again, enact routines and policy in their lessons, and obviously their pedagogy as well, what they do to enable pupils to learn effectively. So obviously there's other activities we expect the student teachers to engage in to be a full part of the professional life of the school. And so again, you know, taking some duties, or supporting staff in your school with duties, helping out with extracurricular activities, potentially contributing to off-site visits, attendance at staff meetings and professional development, progress review days, parents' evening, evening reviews, whatever they're called. Those sorts of things are really beneficial as well. And so we would expect student teachers to be engaged within those practices as well. There is obviously lots of documentation that they need to have, and so obviously they need to maintain what we call their training document, which forms part of their professional development portfolio. So that PDP, as we refer to it, is shared with you, and so you have access to that via our system on Box. So the main document, though, that you would be concerned with is the training document, which essentially captures those weekly meetings that you have with your students. So we really want to see within their timetable a timetabled mentor weekly meeting, so that they know to prepare for that, and that is coming up on there again, given dedicated time to review their targets. So within that, obviously, foundation placement, there'll obviously be lots of reflective discussion and dialogue with not only yourself as a mentor, but other colleagues within the school as well. Some schools will offer professional development for student teachers, plus maybe their early career teachers and other staff as well, and that's great. Some do it in collaboration with other schools. That's fine too. So there's lots of opportunities potentially for our student teachers to engage in discussion to help improve and refine their practice. So all the while throughout this whole placement, they're trying to simply gather and identify evidence for their own professional development. So that will be in line with the K curriculum, which we'll come on to in a while. But obviously that's to look at, to try and see what they need to improve upon in that placement setting. So what can I improve upon, what have I achieved, and what will be my next steps in terms of my teaching and learning. So what we have really is, if you like, an overview, is a feed-forward cycle. So we have that, I guess, diamond aspect of the week, which is the weekly mentor meeting. That's the most important thing for our student teachers and for you as a mentor. So that's, if you like, where the magic happens. That's where all this information is synthesized and we look at setting new targets. So the student teacher should be really organized and prepared for that weekly meeting. And that's why it's great to have that timetable, so they know it's coming up and there's no excuse if it's changing time and day each week. So what they'll need to do then is follow that cycle, is really, have their targets for the week agreed. So, first off, they'll bring along with you to you an initial needs analysis where they have some idea of what their target should be and what they need to work on. But obviously that will depend upon what you've asked them to teach in their timetable. So they should have some targets to initially begin with. So those will be agreed, and potentially once they've started teaching for several weeks, those targets, might be a continuation, and they might be a continuation for maybe 2, 3, 4 weeks, and that is fine. What we would say is that the action would need to change. So the target can remain the same, and we don't expect, for example, something like assessment for learning to be achieved within a week. That's impossible to do, but we would expect actions to change in order to really make sure that they're meeting that target robustly. So those targets would be placed, and those actions would be placed into their training document, and that then is simply approved by you. So that really captures that weekly mentor meeting. So the training document, like I say, is the main document you'll be concerned with, but most of the, if you like, the written aspect of it should be completed by the student teacher. So once those targets have been agreed, they then should be shared with all their observing staff, and sometimes that's great to do by sending out an email to all staff and in the department, and student teachers are more than capable of that. Or it might be that they simply place them on their lesson plan. So we have a spot at the top of the lesson plan, so those that are observing student teachers can see what their targets are currently. So then we lead into those lesson observations, and so what we really like to see is whoever's observing those student teachers really focuses their feedback on the targets that they have. So when they give their feedback to the student teacher, they really should be talking to those targets and how they've met them, or what they need to do to meet them, and what actions come next. Obviously, there'll be other bits and pieces that that we'll observe that have been good, and other things that maybe need to think about. But the main focus of that feedback should be around those targets. So then those that kind of observation is fed back through a dialogue with the student teacher, and the student teacher obviously should record that, or be given a written feedback, and we expect there to be at least one formal observation a week using the Kingston University observation form. So that's one a week. It doesn't have to be the mentor that fills that in. It's just we recommend that at least once a week. So any other feedback that's given, by all means use that Kingston University lesson observation form. That's fine to use for all lessons. But other feedback potentially could be a conversation, and again, that's where we expect the student teacher to jot down notes so they've got those to use to inform the new targets at that weekly mentor meeting. So before that mentor meeting that happens weekly, we expect that student teacher to reflect upon all the feedback they've been given, all the evidence that they've collated in their PDP, and to review that, and to, I guess, really come to that meeting having synthesized that and provide a summary, and to suggest to you as the mentor that I think I have met this target, or I need to do X, Y, and Z to enable me to be robust within this target area that's been given. So that should start the conversation, and obviously that's where your expertise comes in, and you would then obviously have had conversations with other colleagues if they've observed them, or from your own observations would then have that really fruitful, deep discussion with the student teacher about whether targets need to remain the same or whether they need to move on to different targets. So we have this weekly overview that we've got together, and you probably can't see it very clearly there. But this simply just details what we, if you like, how the student teacher should be collecting that evidence. So I've broken it down so it's a little bit clearer here. So you can see that they've got their lesson plan that is, is planned using the Kingston University format, and we expect them to be planning those using that format for most of the time. It might be that they select their best lesson plans to upload to their PDP. We expect at least a minimum of 4 to be uploaded weekly. Obviously, they can upload more, but we expect the minimum should be at least 4 using that formal lesson plan that we've provided. So they'll have their targets in, and that will obviously, they'll teach that lesson plan formally. There's one formal lesson observation a week. And so therefore, the person that's observing that really needs to focus in on those targets. As you can see, the observation would focus on those, giving feedback around those. And then that formal observation, if you like, is discussed at that weekly mentor meeting. Obviously, the same kind of pattern, as you can see in the second row, happens with other lessons. There's still lesson plans planned, there's still lessons taught. There might be other people that observe them, could be yourself that's observing them. But again, other lesson observation feedback is collated, again, hopefully focusing on those weekly targets. And again, that would inform whether targets have been met or still need to be continued. So there's other evidence as well that they can be looking at, and that could be their own lesson observations of other teachers, both within their subject and out of their subject. And they would again be focusing on their targets that they've been set. And then there'll be also self-directed research that they complete as well to meet those targets. So, reading around the subject, looking at videos, listening to podcasts, with again a focus on those targets that have been set. So then there's also the evidence that they're collating within the core content framework that might not be directly linked to those weekly targets, and they could be around things that where they've attended in terms of departmental or school meetings, in terms of extracurricular provision they've helped with, might be pastoral provision, subject knowledge development they should be continually working on, all those sorts of things that they've been doing that aren't necessarily linked in directly to what those targets have been set, but they are having to continue to address because of, say, set tasks, and they could be from their university PGCE module, for example. So all of this generates evidence for them that they should be putting into their PDP, and you can see hopefully all the sorts of things that students should be uploading, and that helps you make a decision on whether targets have been met or not, or whether it's beneficial to continue with them and simply change the actions. So this is why we have smart targets, if you like, that it's really important that they are set really clearly, and so they can be related to the core content framework through the Kingston University curriculum. So it's really important that the targets addressed have actions. And so you'll see within the training document a form weekly like this, which has the targets which are new or ongoing. And they're basically what we're suggesting is you draw them from the development descriptors. And again, that's something that is available to you. We feel that they're really useful as a guide for you as a mentor. So they're broken down by phase. They're broken down by curriculum area as well. So they can be used and you can see how we expect student teachers to progress through each phase. So do have a look at those. So the targets, like we say, should have actions to them. It's the actions that really are the thing that we need to think about carefully, and one thing that potentially could change over several weeks until the actual target was met. And so what we would say is they need to be specific. So sometimes we see simply a target, develop subject knowledge. Well, developing subject knowledge for any area is huge. So we would need to really pin that down. And I've given an example there from physical education, which is my background. So really make sure if it is subject knowledge, for example, you want them to develop, that you've been really specific about what aspect of subject knowledge that they should be focusing on, because you can't expect them to cover everything from the curriculum in 1 or 2 to 3 weeks. So again, there's a link there to the development descriptors, which I said are really helpful as a mentor to provide guidance on target setting. So we have this professional development portfolio that I've talked about, and that's really something that is useful to you to have a look at. It's using Box, which is an online cloud-based system that the university uses, but it's very easy for collaboration and for sharing, so you can edit that if need be as well. So we have it as a preset structure so that it shouldn't be changed, so it's easy for and navigable for everybody to find it. So please leave that as it is, and the students have been asked that as well. But it's the one place where, like I say, all of that evidence we talked about earlier in terms of the weekly activities is placed. So documentation and evidence is all stored there. And so therefore it's really useful for not only the student teacher to review that, but yourself can review that independently or together. So you will have access to that, and do let us know if you're struggling to get access. We can share it in a variety of ways, but hopefully you should get access fairly seamlessly once you have your student teacher with you. So what we suggest obviously is that the student teacher is responsible for preparing for your weekly meeting as much as is possible. And again, that would mean they've got to keep obviously their professional development portfolio up to date with all their lesson plans up there, their observations either by them or others observing them, resources that they've made, anything to do with their activities during the week. They should have that up there so you can see what's changed from one week to the next. So the Mentor Quality Assurance Conference is our university visit, if you like, and that's the official term for it. So in the foundation phase, that will be face-to-face, that moderation. So it basically has a 3 parts to it. As a university subject tutor, we'll meet the student teacher independently to discuss their progress, and we'll have a look at the PDP with them. Most of the time, we'll have a look at the PDP in depth before we visit. There'll then also be an opportunity to observe a lesson potentially, or part of a lesson, and then listen into that feedback from the mentor with the student teacher and see how that's progress is discussed against the targets that have been set, and then how new targets are set. And then lastly, there should be an opportunity for the university subject tutor to then meet with the mentor to discuss and receive aspects on guidance of the paperwork. And that's where we are supportive and can help you identify your needs, but also identify needs that the university needs to address as well. So it's certainly a partnership approach where we can improve things collectively, so the student teacher outcomes are as best as possible. So in terms of the assessment, we have those quality assurance conferences, the visits by the KU tutor, or what you'll sometimes see referred to as the Kingston Lead Mentor, KLM, and that's across the year. And there'll be 2 that are face-to-face and 1 that will be remote. But just to say that each phase is holistically assessed, if you like. So we're not looking for grades. We are looking for an overall judgment that potentially by the end of the course, that they'll have met those teacher standards. So at the end of the course, we should be able to say that they've met the teacher standards, or not, as the case may be, but hopefully they've met them. And it should be identified way before then, if they're not going to meet them, how we can support them to get back on track. So you'll see during each phase that there'll be progress booklets where we'll ask you to say whether they're on track or not on track against each of the core content framework areas. So again, that will be judged not only in those progress booklets, but it's judged weekly. So you'll see within the training document that there's an on track or not on track judgment, and where that's not on track, what we'd ask you to do is get in touch as soon as possible with the subject tutor, the KLM, and then start to think about what extra support measures need to be put in place and whether a cause for concern needs to be started. So you can see there that the training document, therefore, is a really crucial document that needs to be kept up to date weekly, and that's why we need it there, because it's part of the assessment for learning for that student teacher. So it's the formative part of the assessment that we use. So again, the progress booklets we'll have for you to use. They're already available to share, and we'll ask you to complete an early, if you like, judgment, and then there'll be the targets made when the subject tutor or KLM come in to visit and observe, and then what we'll do towards the end of the phase is then make a judgment whether those targets that have been set mid-phase have been met. And again, that's all geared towards the teacher standards. So like I say, it's a holistic judgment. They might be stronger in certain areas of the teacher standards than others, but we should be able to, by the end of the course, come next June, be able to say that they have or should be recommended for qualified teacher status because they've robustly and they can evidence that they've met those teacher standards. So I've talked lots about core content framework and other aspects, so it's probably helpful for you to get a grip of where we're at Kingston University. So we have the vision there that you can see, and then we also have the university's curriculum framework as well that we tie into. And so what we've done with our program is come up with areas of professional learning, and those 4 areas of learning is where we have embedded in the core content framework. So each of those areas and strands, if you like, that we have in our programs, the core content framework is embedded within them. So the core content framework, I know lots of people are getting to grips with that, but that simply is a government document that simply, if you like, guides all teacher education curriculum in the country, and it's the minimum entitlement for all student teachers to have. So it's used, in a sequence way at Kingston University, and that's not just at the university, but that's in schools as well. So we have documentation that supports that. And so it's split up into 2 columns, if you like, is the learn that statements, which mainly refer to university-based training, and then the learn how to statements, which really relate to school-based training, and in effect, how you put theory into practice. And so that's what you would be concerned with, is the learn how to statements as a mentor. So the core content framework, or CCF, is presented around the teacher standards for clarity, but it is not used explicitly during teacher education, and is not used as an assessment framework. So that's something to remember. So it is linked, though, to the early career framework. So therefore, it forms what we're now seeing as a 3-year program of structured support for all new teachers. But again, if you're not familiar with that, then please access it at the link. So if you have accessed it, you'll be familiar that there's 5 core areas of the core content framework. So it's split up into, let's say, behaviour management, pedagogy, curriculum, assessment, and professional behaviours. And you can see in the brackets there how those 8 teacher standards fit into the 5 core areas. So the student should really know and understand and be able to apply that knowledge gained from the core content framework. And therefore, if they can do that, then as you can see, because the teacher standards are embedded within those 5 core areas, if they can understand and apply those 5 core areas, but then obviously it's implicit that actually that they've met the teacher standards by the end of the year. So therefore, we don't necessarily need to be assessing against the teacher standards throughout the course, and that's why we're, if you like, we're judging and making judgments against the 5 core areas. And so that's why you'll see the 5 core areas in the documentation, particularly the training document and the progress booklets that you will be using. So we have lots of documentation, and I don't want to just bring it up and go through it all at once, because I think that's going to be too much and overwhelming, and I'm conscious that this short induction has lots of information in it already. So we will be providing additional resources around the documentation here, and giving exemplars so you can see how it can be filled in and what the expectation is. But we have shared the school-based core content framework outline. That's how we expect the CCF to be embedded within the school-based practice, and that's there as a guide for you. We have the school experience handbook, which is, if you like, is your refer to guide, is your reference document, that if you're not sure about what should be happening, every bit of information is in there. Also, documents are in there in terms of the cause for concern forms as well, and further support forms. We have a secondary pen portrait that students will share with you, and that's simply just, if you like, a very, very succinct CV of their achievements in the past that relate to teaching, and also their current targets. The training document, as you'll be aware, I've referred to lots, and that's the document that captures those weekly meetings, but most importantly, it captures the information around setting targets, reviewing those targets, and detailing the evidence against those targets that student teachers have collated. The progress booklets are what will be shared once every phase. So you will have a progress booklet for the foundation phase. Again, there'll be that early judgment, if you remember, just to check in to see what the target should be. Those targets then will be reviewed when the university, Kingston or Kingston lead mentor or subject tutor, will come in and have a discussion. And then towards the end of the phase, you as the mentor will make a judgment against the agreed targets that have been set in the middle of that phase, whether they've been met or not. The development descriptors, as we've said before, are simply key milestones, if you like, that we expect student teachers to meet throughout each of those phases. And they're broken down by phase, and they're broken down again by core content framework areas. So they're really useful for you to have a look at, particularly if you're not sure about, well, what target should I be setting? Like I say, really, really useful guide for target setting each week. Obviously, in terms of documentation, there is a lesson plan, and there is lesson plans there for student teachers to use, and they should be using those to plan. And then obviously there is a lesson observation form. Certainly we expect that to be used at least once a week for a formal observation form. And if you like to use it more than that, then you're more than welcome. With the further support, cause for concern, or at risk of failing form, they're all found in, like I say, that school experience handbook. And again, that's something that's probably best dealt with is when that arises. Most people won't go along that route, if you like, but we obviously will have one or two throughout the year. And if that is the case, then you will get strong support and guidance from your Kingston lead mentor or subject tutor that will help you through that process. But I think the thing to say is that if you've got any concerns, is to raise them as sooner rather than later. Sometimes we think we're doing the student teacher a favour by delaying making contact, but in the end, it's always far better to, if you like, nip it in the bud or support it in the bud, if you like, as soon as it's possible, because it gives them the greatest chance of succeeding. And like I say, all of that documentation, which is lots, can be found at that link, but it's all found already in the students' professional development portfolio. So they have copies of everything in there already, so they don't need to download it. So essentially, you should be able to just access everything you need from their professional development portfolio. So there is support there, though, if you need. It's available in that box link, but it's also available on the website, which I will share with you as well. So just to finish off with then, just to say, we are here to support you. We greatly appreciate the time and effort and energies that you put into being a mentor, and your other colleagues as well that support in the development of our student teachers. So do get in touch if there's certain resources that would benefit you, but will also benefit the student teacher, or things that could be explained better. By all means, get in touch. Like I say, there are those resources there, and there is the new website, which the link is in this slide as well. So I've listed there the subject tutors or Kingston lead mentors, as they're going to be referred to. They're there to support you. Please do get in touch with them. If there's anything else that you need to raise, then please come to me as the secondary phase lead. If you need to move above that, then obviously there's Mary Jo Valentine, who's the head of teacher education. And then things around placement, you can get in touch directly with Faye McGill as well. So Lastly, but by no means least, there is lots of support in terms of training for mentors. Please have a look at the link there, and you can sign up to any of those courses. We'd be more than delighted to see you there. They will be recorded as well, so if you can't make it for scheduling reasons, that's not a problem. We totally understand the schools are very busy places, so you will be able to access those videos afterwards, the recordings of the sessions in terms of the training. So there's lots and lots of training that we're providing throughout the year, but this is the training for this term. So that draws me a close, and I'll just pop back to summarising. So hopefully you're more familiar with that feedback cycle and the weekly overview, a little bit more confident understanding what we mean by setting smart targets and how the actions are important. Have an understanding what the professional development portfolio is and how you can access that. What happens when we have those quality assurance conferences or visits and the assessment of the student teacher throughout the year. Have an understanding and appreciation of what the Kingston University curriculum is and how that core content framework fits into that. An overview of the documentation that is there and is available to you. And again, contacts there for further support. So I hope you found this induction useful. Please do get in touch if there's any questions you have. And again, we really do appreciate and thank you for the support you're giving to Kingston University, but more importantly, to our student teachers. Thank you.